Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome, dear learners. This is a video for the subject of education, for the course of Bachelor's in Education, and for the paper of Child Development and Learning. This video is based on cognition, and here in this lecture, we will be discussing the meaning, concept, and process of cognition. Also, there will be a discussion on cognition and learning relationship. This video has been recorded by Dr. Iram Khan. The course coordinator and the presenter for this lecture is Dr. Iram Khan from Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. The academic expert or academic reviewer for this video is Professor Jasim Ahmed from Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. This video is produced under the project DTH Swayam Prabha channels of MHRD, New Delhi. Hello dear learners, I am Dr. Iram Khan, Assistant Professor at IASC Faculty of Education, Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. Today I am going to have a discussion with all of you on a very important topic of cognition. In this lecture, we will be covering the meaning and concept of cognition, the process of cognition, and also the cognition and learning. That what exactly is the relationship between cognition and learning. So let us start the discussion. The objectives for this particular lecture are going to base on the meaning and concept of cognition. We are going to explore the process of cognition. Then we will be delineating the concept of metacognition, which is basically the knowing about knowing. And then there will be a discussion based on the different types of metacognition. Then we will be explaining the relationship between cognition and learning. And here we will be discussing in brief about few of the theories. Because these theories, the theory of Piaget and Brunner, are already discussed in detail in a separate lecture. So I will be just discussing these theories in brief. So let us start the discussion. So first of all, let us see the meaning and concept of cognition. This word cognition actually dates back to the 15th century, where it meant thinking and awareness. Cognition refers to the mental action or process of acquiring knowledge and understanding with the help of thoughts, experiences, and the senses. It encompasses many aspects of intellectual functions and processes such as attention, formation of knowledge, memory, and in this case, the working memory, judgments and evaluation, reasoning, then the problem solving, decision making, then comprehending, and the production of language. And there can be many more terms which can be added here, which can be the part of the cognition process. So the cognitive process use existing knowledge and generate new knowledge. Cognitive processes are analyzed from different perspectives within different contexts. And we can say that the field of cognitive science is a very progressive field, and it is an autonomous academic discipline as well. So we will be talking about the concept of cognition, which is having a very kind of divergent meaning. So now let us talk about the process of cognition. And whenever we are going to talk about the process of cognition, it will be in terms of human cognition. So human cognition is a conscious and unconscious, concrete or abstract, as well as intuitive and conceptual. So this basically has, or it actually contains the processes such as memory, association, concept formation, pattern recognition, language, then attention, problem solving, perception, then mental imagery. And there will be, if you go on taking the names of such type of terms, the list will be very long. So traditionally we have seen that emotion was not thought of as a cognitive process, but now many of the researchers are actually being undergone to see that basically this particular term of emotion is also related to any of the cognitive processes or not. So there are very much important researches which are being undertaken to examine the cognitive psychology of emotions. Then researchers have also focused on a person's awareness of his or her own strategies and methods of cognition. And this particular thing is known as the process of metacognition, and we will be discussing about this term metacognition in detail. So while we have seen that few people would deny that cognitive processes are a function of the brain, a cognitive theory will not necessarily make reference to the brain or to the biological processes. It may purely describe behavior in terms of information, flow, or function. So, relatively recent fields of study, such as neuropsychology, aim to bridge this gap using the cognitive paradigms to understand how the brain implements the information processing functions, which is covered under cognitive neuroscience, or to understand how pure information processing systems can simulate the human cognition. And the best example of this particular type of simulation can be seen in artificial intelligence, or may be seen in computers. So the branch of psychology that studies brain injury to infer normal cognitive function is called the cognitive neuropsychology. The links of cognition to evolutionary demands are studied through the investigation of animal cognition. Now let us talk about metacognition. This particular term metacognition is actually relating to the cognition about cognition, thinking about thinking, knowing about knowing, then becoming aware of a person's awareness and the higher order thinking skills. Metacognition literally means cognition about cognition, or knowledge about knowledge, or knowledge about knowing something, or learning. So this metacognitive knowledge is used to monitor and regulate cognitive processes such as reasoning, comprehension, problem solving, learning, and many more. So the term comes from the root word meta, meaning beyond or on top of. So metacognition can take many forms. It includes knowledge about when and how to use the particular strategies for learning or problem solving. So metacognition involves three kinds of knowledge. The first one is declarative knowledge. The next one is the procedural knowledge, and the next one is the conditional knowledge. So here the declarative knowledge is basically about yourself as a learner. So the knowledge about yourself as a learner and the factors that influence your learning and memory, and the skills, the strategies and resources which are needed to perform a task, knowing what to do. So this is basically the declarative knowledge. Then comes the procedural knowledge, or knowing how to use the strategies. Then comes the conditional knowledge, which is to ensure the completion of the task. So knowing when and why to apply the procedures and the strategies. This is basically considered under the conditional knowledge. So metacognition is the strategy, or you can say the strategic application of these three: the declarative, the procedural, and the conditional knowledge, to accomplish different goals and to solve many problems of the life of a person. So this metacognitive knowledge is used to regulate thinking and learning of a human being. So now let us talk about the cognition and learning, basically the relationship between these two. So how do the children become capable of exercising their cognitive skills as they grow and develop? This is a particular question, and there are many more questions which we have to answer whenever we are talking about cognition and learning. What will be the next question? How does cognitive development related to the process of change in the ways of thinking, reasoning, and problem solving among children take place among the different ages and stages of their developmental period? So this is the next question, which is very important to answer whenever we are talking about the relationship between cognition and learning. So such questions have been answered by the psychologists through their viewpoints, which are actually considered as their theories. So the theories of cognitive development. For this purpose, we will be discussing a few of the theories which are very important, and whenever we talk about cognition, these theories are must to mention. So the first theory is basically the theory of Piaget, which is named as the Piaget's theory of cognitive development and Brunner's theory of cognitive development. So let us just have a kind of uh, relook, because there were other lectures which were based on these two theories, and we have detailed discussion on these theories, but we will just have a revisit, and we will see that how the process of cognition is very much related to these theories. So the first theory is the theory of Piaget. Piaget's theory of cognitive development. So, what exactly was the notion of uh, Piaget, the theoretical notion of Piaget? Piaget basically designed a proper framework to understand the structure, the functioning, and development of the cognitive network of the human mind. He postulated that, like physical organs of the human body, there are two aspects of the human mind. The first one here, which is the theoretical postulate of Piaget, is the cognitive structure of the human mind, and the second one is the cognitive functioning. So we will just have a look on these two, the cognitive structure and the cognitive functioning. So the first one is cognitive structure. What exactly this means? So unlike the other creatures, the human baby is born with a few practical instincts and reflexes. And these reflexes can be observed in the form of sucking, then picking up something or looking towards anything. If somebody is making any noise, the baby is in actually he or she tries to look towards that direction. So all these things are basically the inborn instincts. So we can say that the initial cognitive structure of infants is supposed to incorporate only those cognitive abilities or potentials which help them to do such acts, as we have already discussed: the act of looking, reaching out, or grasping something, or sucking. So all these things are basically innate. So Piaget named these abilities or potentials as schemas, and he termed them as the basic building blocks of our thinking process. He defined them as the organized system of actions or thoughts that allow us to mentally represent or think about the objects and events in our world, in our environment. So the various schemas with their contents form the basic structure of the human mind. The earlier schemas represent those reflexes and instincts that are biologically inherited. However, we can see that as the child grows and develops with the interaction of physical and social environment, this child is able to form different schemas which are resulting in changes and modifications in the cognitive structure of this child. So this is basically the cognitive structure which is given by Piaget. Now let us talk about the next aspect, which is the cognitive functioning. So the structure of an organism is said to play a decisive role in its functioning. So we can say that what is available to an individual in terms of his schemas decide that how this person, this child is going to respond to the stimuli present in his or her physical or social environment. On the other hand, the individual has to adapt to his or her environment for survival as well as for proper growth and development. So the key of this cognitive development lies in the constant interaction with with an adaptation to this child's physical and social environment. So the task of such adaptation is carried out through the process of assimilation and accommodation. And also there is one more term which is equilibration. So assimilation, accommodation and equilibration, these are the three terms which actually constitute the cognitive functioning. Assimilation involves the incorporation of new events into pre-existing cognitive structures. Accommodation means the existing structures change to accommodate to the new information. This dual process, which is assimilation and accommodation, enables the child to form the schema. So equilibration involves the person striking a balance between himself or herself and the environment. So between assimilation and accommodation, actually this striking the balance between the environment and the child happens. So when a child experiences a new event, there is some sort of disequilibrium, a kind of unsettling. So it sets in like whenever this disequilibrium arises, it is this child is not actually in consonance uh, until this child is able to assimilate and accommodate the new information and attain the equilibrium. So there are many types of equilibrium between assimilation and accommodation that vary with the level of development and the problems to be solved. So in this particular cognitive functioning, we have seen that this child is trying to remove the disequilibrium and come to the equilibrium so that a kind of consonance is developed. So this was the cognitive functioning which was explained by Piaget when he was trying to give the theory of the cognitive development of human mind. Then Piaget has also given the stages of cognitive development. So Piaget may be best known for these stages of cognitive development given by him. So Piaget discovered that children think and reason differently at different periods in their lives. So he believed that everyone passed through an invariant sequence of four qualitative distinct stages. Invariant means that the person cannot skip stages or these stages can't be reordered. So although every normal child passes through the stages in exactly the same order, this is something which is a connotation of Piaget. So there is some variability in the ages at which children attain each stage. So the four stages are, the first one is sensory motor stage, which starts from birth and it goes on till 2 years of age. The next stage is pre-operational stage, which starts from 2 years of age and it goes on till 7 years. Then there is the concrete operational stage, which starts at 7 years of age and it goes on till 11 years of age. And then is the formal operational stage, which is actually known by the abstract thinking, and it is actually it starts from the 11 years of age group and it goes on, according to Piaget, it goes on throughout the life. So each stage has major cognitive tasks which must be accomplished. So in the sensory motor stage, the mental structures are mainly concerned with the mastery of concrete objects. The mastery of symbols take place in the pre-operational stage. And when children begin to think symbolically and learn to use words and develop language as a tool for thinking. So basically, this was related to symbolic learning. Then in the concrete stage, the children learn mastery of class, basically the mastery of classes, then relationship between numbers and how to reason. And the last stage deals with mastery of thoughts or abstract thinking. So here the abstract thinking starts. So these are the four stages given by Piaget when he tried to give the stages of cognitive development. So now let us talk about the Bruner's cognitive development theory. Whenever we are talking about cognition or anything related to cognitive development, these two theories, the first one by Jean Piaget and the other one by Jerome Bruner, are the must to discuss. So basically, Jerome Bruner identified three stages of cognitive representation. And these stages are the inactive stage, the iconic stage, and the symbolic representation stages. And there is a separate lecture in which we have discussed in detail about this particular theory of Brunner. But here we are going to just have a relook, a brief account of this theory. So as we have seen that there are three stages of cognitive representation. The first stage is inactive stage, which is the representation of knowledge through actions. The inactive stage appears first. So this stage involves the encoding and storage of information. There is a direct manipulation of objects without any internal representation of the objects. So this is the inactive phase. The other one is the iconic stage of representation. This is basically where or which is the visual summarization of images. So the iconic stage appears from 1 to 6 years old child, like in a child who is of 1 year until the age of 6 years. Uh, this stage involves an internal representation of external objects visually in the form of mental images or icons. Then comes the symbolic representation, which is the use of words and other symbols to describe experiences. The symbolic stage is basically from the 7 years of age and upwards, and is when information is stored in the form of a code or symbol, such as the language. So each symbol has a fixed relation to something which is represented. So basically we have seen that here once we have reached to the symbolic representation stage, the event of language has started. So basically we can say that language plays a very important role whenever we are talking about cognition or cognitive development. So the foundations of the cognitive theory of language acquisition, uh, if we talk about the language acquisition, it was set by Jean Piaget. His theory was that language acquisition was based on the maturation of the brain. So Piaget believed that children must be allowed to explore the world by their own, allowing a first-hand experience. This exposure to the world allows the cognitive mind to develop, therefore allowing language to develop into a more sophisticated manner. So lots and lots of researches are done in this area, and researches have been conducted to study the connection between the cognitive status of an individual and the linguistic capabilities that this person utilizes. The cognitive language acquisition theory uses the idea that children are born with very little cognitive abilities. It means that they are not able to recognize and process very much information. Like too much information can't be processed by a very small child. So at birth, the infants are limited to very small scope of mental processes that must be developed over time. As they grow up, they actually develop all these mental processes. So as the infant grows to become a toddler, the cognitive process of the child develop through the various experiences that this child is going to gain through the interaction with the members of the society or the environment. So Bruner suggested, or he has given this particular suggestion, that a connection between the biological structure of the brain and cognitive growth is existing. So he basically gave this theory that as a child formulates language in the brain, the cognitive skills of the child will grow, thereby complementing the development of more sophisticated language. So the cognitive theory in the view of like in the views of Bruner has a biological basis and a socio-cultural activation. This combination of multiple theories create the multifaceted nature of language acquisition. So we have seen that when we were talking about the language acquisition methodology or the thought process of Piaget, he was concentrating much on the development, the biological development. And when we talk about Bruner's theory, then the language acquisition is much more inclined toward the social interaction. So when we combine these theories, we can come, or we can zero down to the to a sort of uh, uh, like result that language acquisition is a result of biological developments as well social interactions and the interaction with the environment. So with this, we have now reached to the summary of this lecture, and here we have seen the meaning and the concept of cognition. We have discussed about the process of cognition and its psychological basis. We have discussed about the process of metacognition, and basically which is talking about the cognition about cognition, thinking about thinking, knowing about knowing, becoming aware of a person's awareness and higher order thinking skills. So we have talked a lot about metacognition. Then we have discussed the cognition and learning, where the cognitive development theories of Piaget and Bruner were revisited, because we have already seen these theories in detail in different lectures. That's why we have just had a kind of overview or a brief account of these theories in this lecture. Also, we have discussed a few things about the language development theory, which is related to the process of cognition. So, with this, I hope that things related to the process of cognition and the relationship between the process of learning and cognition would be clear to you. I will show you a few of those references and the consulted links which were used for developing this lecture. And I hope that this discussion will become very much useful for you all, and hope to see you in different lectures some other time. Thank you so much. Dear students, You were watching a video on the topic of cognition. And here in this lecture, we have covered the meaning, concept, and process of cognition, as well the cognition and learning relationship. This video lecture was recorded by faculty at home during the national lockdown period for COVID-19 pandemic using minimal technical resources. Technical errors, if any, are unintentional and may please be ignored. For any queries with regard to this lecture or broadcast, kindly send your email to techsupport@dth.ac.in. Thank you so much.